Scott Grayson was there last night. Of course, Grayson's grades posted after every Eagles game, and he's handing out A's like Pez dispensers over there. Good game last night for the offense, Scott, and a couple of guys that stood out. You had Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, Wendell Smallwood, Torrey Smith, guys on the offensive side of the ball. It was good to see some of the off-season acquisitions get involved last night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing out of all that, you're not going to see a lot of Alshon Jeffrey. You're not going to see a lot of Torrey Smith. But in the situations where they had the chance to make plays, they did. Wendell Smallwood, to me, was the guy who I really needed to show up. And I liked the way he ran. I liked how hard he ran. Even the play where he only got 5 yards and got a face mask called on him for 15, that was a huge play because they were backed up in their own end. And if he's not running hard, perhaps that face mask isn't there. So I thought Wendell Smallwood definitely needed to show up and play. He did, which creates an interesting and I think a great competition between him and Corey Clement at the running back position.
Scott, you covered Wendell Smallwood at West Virginia in your time covering the Mountaineers. The style of back he was there, do you think that he can be a successful guy, or is he more of a part-time guy?
I think he can be successful here, but the biggest knock on him so far is that he's been injury prone last year and early on this year, and that's what he's got to fight.
Was that the case? Was that the case for him at West Virginia?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, he seemed to weather the hits and everything pretty well there. I don't know if he's just just happening to take shots at some time, but he was pretty durable at West Virginia, and I thought that was one reason why I thought he'd do well here.
Scott Grayson. Grayson's grades are up at 97.3 ESPN.com. A lot of A's, a lot of B's. And one of the guys that got a B last night was, of course, the quarterback Carson Wentz. You said he didn't look quite as sharp as he had in some other games, but still good recognition on that 50-yard play to find Torrey Smith. Made a couple other nice throws. The one with Alshon Jeffrey was good to see that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one to Torrey Smith, the thing that impressed me the most was at the moment he went to throw that ball, Torrey Smith still had two guys by him, but he could tell that he had the speed to beat them. That recognition, that kind of play from a guy who's only played 16 regular season games, 1 year in the league, that's important to me to see that out of him. I really like the ball, the way he's leading Alshon Jeffrey on that slant touchdown that he scored on. Those are passes that are tricky to make over the middle. He's just, in my opinion, I thought his clock was a little off last night in terms of evacuating the pocket and maybe, getting a couple of yards on the positive side instead of, a couple of those hits he ended up taking, which obviously weren't good. But that's kind of the one thing I think he really just needs to work on. And that's why I think I was a little disappointed that Doug Peterson took him out after one quarter. Now, on the plus side, I get that you're really trying to keep him healthy, and I get that entirely. But when those live bullets are flying and he's got to work on that clock in his head, knowing when to get out of there, you can't really do that in practice. It's got to be in those preseason games. But he's done now, and what he's got, we're going to see what we're going to go with here in week one.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen more from Smallwood last night. Would definitely like to see him get more carries. But another guy that took advantage of the carries was Vinny Curry, which is interesting because, he's been a guy that we've been really questioning the last year with that contract he got. Barnett's looked really good, but Curry last night, he really took advantage of the extra reps he was given.
Yeah, I said that about Smallwood. He really needed to show up. I thought Vinny Curry needed to show up last night. He had a huge opportunity in the fact that Brandon Graham wasn't playing, so there was more opportunities for him there. And I agree with you. I think he did take advantage of him. I thought he played pretty well. He seemed to get off the line pretty good, crash down on running plays to be there as the ball carrier was coming across the line of scrimmage. And, he got into the backfield a couple of times. So, yeah, I thought Vinny Curry showed well, and I entirely agree with you. He needed to. And now the question is whether or not he can be more consistent because, it's okay to show it every now and then, but you got to be able to show it more frequently than not in this league.
What about Michael Kendricks, who wanted out? There doesn't seem to be a role for him, but 3 picks was all over the field last night.
I think the Eagles need to be thanking him because, in my opinion, as teams suffer some injuries, as perhaps it gets closer to cut day for some of these teams, to me, he's a guy I could see how he's still trying to trade. And quite frankly, with the preseason he's having, what he's put on film has to be, in my opinion, has to be appealing to some other teams. Now, you got to ask yourself, if you're willing to give up the depth that he provides, and is looking to provide right now with the way he's played. I don't know if they're willing to do that or not, but I think Howie would make a trade. I know he's, been looking to trade Kendricks, and to me, I think Kendricks has only elevated his trade stock at this point, and I think the Eagles should be grateful for that. We'll see whether or not anything happens here in the next couple of weeks, but to me, Kendricks has played very well. He seems to be having the speed out there on the field that the Eagles have been waiting for him to show in terms of attacking plays, and he's at the point of attack when the ball is thrown. So I think, Michael Kendricks has had a great preseason, although I will qualify it or quantify it with this. He's been doing it against most of the second-teamers. He's not really out there much with the starters. So, how would he perform if he was out there against some of those starters? Probably not quite as well.
Scott Grayson's grades are up at 973ESPN.com after every Eagles game. How about another West Virginia guy, Rasul Douglas? They took him in the third round. A lot of times you want the third rounder to contribute. Do you see that happening?
I think he's going to contribute, but not a ton. I think what they want out of him is the ability to, study and watch some of these older guys. And I think that's part of what Darby was brought in. They needed him. They needed Darby to come in here, but I think Rasul Douglas will benefit from being able to watch some of these other guys and how they cover. I think he's another guy who has got to get more consistent, but he seems to be around the ball just like he was in college. And I like a couple of plays he made last night where he broke on the ball almost like a Darby and was able to bat it away or come up and make a stop for little to no gain. Those kind of plays are important for those guys to make. I think he's going to contribute in more of a nickel role this year. And I think that looks for him long-term to emerge as more of a corner. So we'll see. He's got great length. He's got great size, especially at a corner position. And that's something I think that they're going to look to utilize from him down the road.
One guy that got a D for you was Ronald Darby, and that's just not because his last name begins with a D. You didn't think he played very well last night.
Well, you know what? I heard what you said when right before you brought me on, and I completely agree with everything you said. Look, he's in position. He is turning his head around.
Oh, because I know, Scott, that you were not a big fan of Nolan Carroll because of the lack of positioning he was consistently in.
Or a guy we saw last night in the teal, which was Byron Maxwell. Ronald Darby to me is turning his head around. He's in position, and you're right. It was a complete 50-50 ball. He was inches away from batting that one away that wouldn't have gone 72 yards and would have in turn, I think, turned into a punt because I believe it was third down. The pass interference, he got beat on the double move, but look how quickly he recovered and almost got back there in time to avoid the PI. I like Ronald Darby. I think he's going to be a heck of a big upgrade over what they had, similar to what you said, when you brought me on. And I look for big things from him. I really do. I think he's really going to help this team. I don't know that you can call him an island. And we'll see how he does against some of the receivers in the NFC that he's going to see twice this year. Odell Beckham Jr., Des Bryant. How will he handle those guys? But I like what he's bringing so far. He just happened to be a couple inches short of making some of those bigger plays last night.
Yeah, there's no question that at least they have a guy in the secondary. Before, you had just a bunch of average guys that you were hoping could somehow piecemeal week to week. At least there's one guy out there that the other team has to have some recognition of where he is.
Yeah, definitely. He's one of those guys to me who makes other people around him better because, look, in the past they had to keep McLeod or Jenkins available to help these corners more frequently. And I think with Darby you're going to find that they can get away from doing that more often than not. Does that mean that you can call him an island? No, but they're going to try to put that kind of trust in him, and that's going to allow them to make plays elsewhere on the field. So we'll see how Ronald Darby evolves. Don't forget, he's only been in camp for about 2 weeks, so he's still trying to learn some of this defense, and some of the terminology, and kind of where to expect his teammates to be while he's out there covering these receivers. So I think some of that's going to show as well as more time passes.
Grayson's grades are posted. Another D was Terrence Brooks, and I bring him up because they brought in Corey Graham. Brooks had a good beginning of camp. It seems that the Eagles like Graham, and that Brooks' night last night may have cost him a spot.
Yeah, among the biggest sins in my mind was his tackling or lack thereof. He was there at the point of attack a couple of times and failed to make the tackle. And when you're on the last line of defense or close to it, you can't afford to not wrap a guy up because it went for a big play. I think it went for a touchdown last night. You can't have that. And those are the kind of plays that he can't afford to have show up on his film, and they are. They're there. He can't get rid of them now. And, last night was not a good performance for Terrence Brooks. And, yeah, I mean, we're going through this year now where they don't make any cuts until after the last preseason game. But, I mean, this fourth one's going to be a big one for him, no doubt.
Yeah, and you had the interception last night from Watkins, so I guess that kind of at least put him in a little bit better footing for this team. And there's still a couple of battles. That fourth preseason game, while you're not going to see a lot of starters, you're definitely going to see some interesting battles for some of these backup roles, which we know in today's NFL mean a lot. Depth means a lot in this league.
Absolutely. And here's the biggest question, too. Are we going to see Nick Foles at all? I mean, he hasn't performed at all because he's nursing this sore elbow, which begs the question, at what point do you have to consider walking away from him just because, he's not here. He's not there to help you if you need him. So Matt McGloin's going to get a lot of opportunities again, and possibly Dane Evans.
We'll see how it all shakes out. Any other observations from last night that you'd like to share, because it was a long one?
Yeah, one thing I think that I Josh brought up to me that I completely agree with is, hey, I'm still working through preseason cobwebs as well. I failed to grade the offensive line, and particularly I think those starters at times showed some good things. But Jason Kelsey, to name one guy, they allowed too many hits on Carson Wentz. And while I was blaming Wentz a little bit for his mental clock, I think there was times, in particular, one big blitz. I think it was Smallwood that failed to pick it up, which he's not on the line, but. The line needs to protect Wentz a little bit better than they did last night.
Yeah, I thought he took a lot of hits too.
Earlier. Yeah, and that's one thing obviously you don't want. You don't want for him to have to take those hits because, it only takes one, and eventually he might not get up from it.
All right, Scott Grayson has Grayson's grades every Eagles game at 97.3 ESPN.com. It's Eagles-Jets next week, and of course then we kick off the regular season right here. Listen to every Eagles game on 97.3 ESPN. Thank you, Scott.
All right, you got it.